Welcome to SDA Mastery, the podcast series hosted by Tania Gomez Consulting. In each episode, we'll be sharing valuable insights and tips that can help you learn the intricacies of specialist disability accommodation. We will demystify the entire SDA process, give you direct access to experts in the field, and help you to discover what life is like as an SDA provider. Whether you're thinking about leaping into SDA or you're looking to level up your existing NDIS business, you're in the right place. Come on in, let's explore the SDA space together.
Welcome, Rachel. Today we're here to talk all things SIL. So we're talking specifically to SDA providers around SIL and its role within the SDA landscape. To begin with, I wanted to hear a little bit about Allara and I guess your personal journey as a SIL provider to kind of set the scene for everyone around what SIL is and what you do in that space.
So my name's Rachel. I'm the founder and CEO of Allara Support Services. We were established in 2020. We're 3 years young. I like to say that we're young because the rest feels like it's just getting too old. So we are the supported independent living specialist. We made the decision early on in the piece to do one thing and do it really well.
Yeah.
And my background is 18 years working in disability, from starting off as a support worker to doing middle management, executive leadership roles, so on and so forth. My whole career working in running and operating SIL services. So it was kind of the only thing I knew, but I was absolutely determined to do it and do it differently. So having watched a lot of, sort of older not-for-profits do it a certain way, I was really wanting to break the mold and be flexible and innovative about the way that we deliver SIL services, kind of be like the Gucci vibes of SIL, if I'm being honest. So that's my background. We are over 200 staff now. We have 22 plus SIL services across of New South Wales. We are head office in Penrith. I'm really committed to sort of supporting local and staying local in my community too, about servicing my local community as well.
A lot of growth in 3 years and definitely all about SIL and an expert in that space. So for those people who don't understand what the difference between SDA and SIL is, how would you differentiate the two?
So how I like to explain both of them is the SDA is the brick and mortar, so the dwelling, and the SIL is essentially the care. I think it can be as simple as that. And I think when we overcomplicate it, it kind of gets a little bit tainted. So I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Okay.
I think SDA providers feel, when they're going through the process and haven't done it before, they feel like the money that they're paid potentially is for the supports, and they get a little bit confused about what the separation is and that it needs to be separate, and that a lot of people come and talk to me and say, look, we want to do all of it. We want to do SDA, we want to do SIL, we want to do both of them. We want to, make sure we're providing both sides of support. Obviously, that's better from a risk perspective, and we know that there's some conflicts of interest there, but you've always been focused on the SIL side and you do that really well. So you've talked about the care, but what exactly does that encompass? What do you do as a day-to-day inside a SIL home?
A SIL is providing care across a 24-hour setting to people living with disability. SIL is basically providing the care across a 24-hour setting for all activities of daily living to support somebody to live a meaningful life, right? Or to live the life that they want to live. And that can look very differently. So, if we wanted to break it down in the traditional terms, it would be things like personal care, meal preparation, domestic assistance, community access. So those would be the traditional things that we would provide support in.
Yeah. Wonderful. And there's a lot of models around SIL and terminology that gets thrown around for the supports within the SDA property. So we talk about SIL, which could be considered a shared support model. There's also the concierge model, drop-in supports, vertical models, all these kind of buzzwords that are used. Can you explain the different models and I guess what you do?
So concierge model, this is hands down one of my favorite models. I think that this is you know, when the NDIS was rolled out, this was what was integrated community living, right? So it's where you can live in a vertical model or in other models of care, but you essentially live in your own home or in your own unit or villa or what have you, and you just happen to have carers on site as well. You can buzz them as needed using a multitude of assistive technology or communication devices, and then you can have care when and if you require it. And I love it because it means that you can live independently, not in a traditional group home setting, still receive the care when you need it. And I just love the concierge word too. It sounds so high end, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Definitely the Gucci.
Right. That's what I was going for, you know? And I think like in an apartment setting, you know, you look at like New York and all of these beautiful places across the world, to live in a concierge apartment is very high end, right? To have the concierge down on the front door that can go and get your mail for you, you know, and that can bring you up certain things and to let your cleaner in, you know, and all of those fancy things. So I really love that model. That can be delivered in a vertical setting, in a unit or villa style setting as well in this market, in a vertical apartment style model. So
when we say vertical, what we're literally meaning is that in an apartment block, let's say it has 20 units over 5 floors, there might be different participants, one on each level, with an OOA or an on-site accommodation for a support worker somewhere in the building that they can buzz. That's what the vertical refers to.
Yeah, like, I mean, how I consider vertical is more than 2 levels.
Okay.
Right? So you've got a 2-story home. Okay. It's very rare you'll see a 3-story home, and then obviously 4th, 5th and 6th in a vertical setting. Yep. So that's how I consider the vertical model. But again, traditionally it would be more like apartment. I think the concierge model, it typically represents really good value for money because you're typically splitting one carer amongst multiple residents. So if you're looking at one carer supporting 10 residents in a, you know, overnight on-site assistance, it's very good representation of value for money because it's a small amount of what probably their budget is going to be in their core support budget. So it allows them to then use their other budget on, you know, their one-on-one or, you know, activities that they want to enjoy, go out in the community, etc. Additionally, what I love about this model is if you've got a flexible SIL provider such as ourselves, is that you can work with a multitude of, you know, external providers, you know, informal supports, you know, you can live with a significant other. You're not pigeonholed to just having one service provider engaged, the one provider providing the concierge, but then you can have ABC Care or Higher Up or Mabel or your boyfriend or, you know, whomever come in and provide care outside of that, which I really love as well because it really is like choice and control and like actually meaning it when we say it is choice and control, you know, because it's not often you can live in a traditional group home and have multiple service providers, you know, providing care out of that setting. So that's why I like that. It also has like assurance of safety. So it's a model now where you can live safely and not have to live in a traditional group home setting, which wasn't an option, you know, historically, you know. So now you can know that there's care on site, you know, so you feel safe and know that there's someone at the touch of a button, you know.
I've heard some criticisms of the concierge model being that, well, it's the logistics. Like how, like if you say, okay, the concierge model is really good at, well, you can use the supports when you need it, or if you want dinner at 6, as opposed to someone saying your dinner time is, as an example. But the criticism there is, well, what if everyone wants dinner at 6 p.m? Then do you go back to saying, well, you're 6, you're 6:30, you're 7, you're 7:30, because logistically you can't give everyone dinner at 6:30.
Yeah. And typical, you'd consider dinner, if they're structured, like always wanted at 6 p.m. every night. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't eat dinner at the same time every night. But some people like to eat dinner at the same time every night. So if they do, then you'd probably consider that as part of their planned supports. You know, if they're a little bit more flexible and they're like, you know, hey, I want to have dinner at 7:30 tonight, but, you know, tomorrow night they want to have a late night snack at 10:30. You know, perfect use of a concierge service. You know, so I suppose one of the challenges with concierge is when you are servicing 10 residents in one building, you might not have the flexibility to be in everybody's apartment at one time. So there are some challenges, right? But that's across the board.
Yeah.
So I suppose you just manage those with the cohort that resides there.
And I guess if everyone want dinner at 6:30 every night, you could have extra staff on
Absolutely.
at that point in time, so everyone
you negotiate
could have
that with everybody, right? So you say, look, everybody wants to eat dinner at 6 o'clock. What's wrong? So it is, you know, and you just have to pivot and adapt, you know.
It won't surprise you that I do have dinner at the same time every night. 5:30 on the spot in my house.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that because you're feeding the whole village?
I'm feeding 4 of us and 4 kids, and I have to, you know, start bedtime for the youngest one, and, you know, it goes flies on from there.
Yeah. Mine's a little bit more chaotic in my house. I don't think that surprises you either. That's concierge. You can tell that I love that model heaps. Drop-in support, anything that's less than 24 hours. So it's where somebody, you know, has lower support needs. So they have drop-in support. It can, you know, they use other words like ILO and so on and so forth. And that can be in a shared setting or in a single occupant setting. It could be living in the community. It could be living in a SDA. So it depends. Vertical model, I think we've already touched on. And I think the shared support model is similar to that of a shared, like a traditional group home. Yeah. But we're seeing some really cool models come out, you know, and I'm going out and trying to, you know, source some really cool dwellings as well to try and continue to innovate in our space and to be able to provide beautiful housing with appropriate support to people living with a disability. You know, we're seeing villas, boarding homes, SIL-only studios, you know, all types of different scenarios. So yeah, I think that's the notes that I wrote, but we're seeing the NDIA come to the party now with the participant not needing to have SIL funding. They're allowing participants to use their funding a bit more flexibly. You know, gone are the days where you have to submit a roster of care every time you want to make a SIL submission. So if you've got $250,000 in core, you can use that living in your own home, living in a SIL shared setting, or however you want it, which is nice to see the evolution of that as well.
I noted that in the NDIS review that it heavily focused on the idea of flexible supports and being able to use your funds across where you wanted to live as opposed to it being SIL specific.
Absolutely. And if we can remove as much red tape, you know, for these individuals to be able to actually give back the choice and control, then if they've got their budget, then they can choose how they want to spend that, which gives them the care that they want to receive to live their life their way.
Which is what it's all about. How can an SDA provider determine if the SIL provider is good quality? So what would you say makes a good SIL provider?
This might sound like it should just come with it, but I think they should have passion, kindness, empathy. They need to be ethical, you know, carry themselves with integrity. I think that's just the bare minimum. They can tailor a service to the individual nature of the participants that they support. Important that they don't just throw around the buzzword person-centered, like they actually put it into practice. They're value aligned, like that they've got really good core values which they live in principle every day. I think that they absolutely need to be NDIS registered. It's a very high risk service, and there's the potential for it to be fatal in somebody's life. Compliance is often the bane of our existence, but you know, we need it in there to make sure that we're providing a really high quality and safe service. So I think that that's a no-brainer. They have runs on the board, you know, that they know what they're doing, and if and they've got a proven track record. They specialize or they have some form of expertise in delivering the service. We're seeing a lot of new providers come in the space, and I think it's wonderful, but I think that they need to understand what they're doing, particularly in this space. It's a very complex service to operate and run. If you're going to specialize in it, do it really well. They have really good, robust like processes and systems that they respond to feedback and complaints in a timely fashion. Have really good training and quality framework. If you were to go out to market and see who is really good at SIL, maybe ask another SDA provider.
The importance of the SIL provider can't be understated in the SDA's business model. SDA providers get really confused about that, and that's why they kind of want to do that piece themselves as well, is that they see that there's often much more funding for the SIL provider than there is for the SDA provider. The SDA landscape's very different than the SIL landscape. They talk about yields and percentages and returns. But it is about the percent, because they've got investors, they need a percentage return for their investors. So I get it makes sense.
Yes.
They seem to focus on what the dollar figure is, as opposed to going, okay, you know, if you did a business case or a risk analysis on an SDA business, the variable there is the SIL provider, because the participant will leave supports and leave that premises or that dwelling based on the supports that they're providing.
Absolutely.
So if you were an SDA provider, knowing that, how would you minimize that risk? Would it be like, I've heard of SDA providers doing tenders and cycling through providers, but I don't know how that ensures choice and control.
Yeah.
Is it leaving it up to participants? Is it just speaking to the SIL provider and the participants regularly to get feedback? Or how can they gauge that it's actually a good SIL provider? Because they often are builders or architects or developers, and they have no idea about what a good level of care should look like in a SIL provider.
Oh, that's scary. If I'm going out to work with an SDA provider, I will put together a capability document, you know, to show that we've got the skills and the runs on the board to deliver a service. You could go to tender. I love that idea. And a number of SDA providers do that. You should always seek feedback from your participants. I love the idea of having them interview the SIL provider. There's been a number of times where I've sat on a panel with participants and stakeholders on the other side, and they've interviewed us. They ask the hard-hitting questions, you know, and the care, you know, is what's important to them, and let them choose. They should have a continued vote. You know, I know that a number of providers do a vote every couple of years, which keeps us on our toes as well in terms of ensuring that we keep that quality up even after we've been appointed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's lots of examples. What advice would you give someone who's considering being an SDA provider for the first time?
As an SDA provider, when you're just considering the dwelling, you really got to start with building a high quality product, something that you would want your loved one or your friend or family or yourself to live in.
Yeah.
I see some really, really good SDA, and I see some really not so great SDA. High-end finishes, good circulation space, build them a few square meters larger, you know, make sure they're in nice proximity to, you know, the community, that they've got common area spaces if you're building an apartment. Make the product good. This product is going to be around for a number of years. So if you're talking about SDA, somebody getting the highest level of SDA today, they're going to get, in 5 years' time, there's going to be a new shiny product down the road with the same level of funding. And so what's stopping them from going from your property down to the one down the road? Obviously having good care, but if you start with a good product, you've got long-term tenure. So I think always start there. You have to know what you're doing as an SDA provider, and if you don't know, find somebody who can help teach you or show you or mentor you or what have you. And maybe just know that it's not a get rich quick scheme. You got to be in it for the right reasons.
There's a long-term investment as well. Like, you're not getting these 12-18% yields from day one, and you might not ever get them. That it's a long-term commitment to a person.
Exactly. That at the end of the day, it should be considered like a service-based business, even though it's a product. You're essentially giving a home to someone living with a disability, you know, so just be in it for the right reasons.
Yeah. And you talked about the aesthetics of the house or the home. Your homes are beautiful,
thank you.
And that's something that you seem to do differently. You work with builders who do that, so you're not the builder in the SDA side of things. No. Again, you focus on what you're good at.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
But are you working with them to decide on the finishes?
Oh, I love when they get me involved in the design stage.
Yeah.
You know, if I can see a product through from the beginning, that's when I've seen some really successful stuff come to fruition. It's way easier to do it at design phase than it is to retrofit it once it's built. Yeah. So if you can go to market, even if it's with a SIL provider or participants, or, you know, I'm sure that there's other avenues and community groups that you can go to for feedback on product. But if you can get it at design stage, then I think that's ideal.
I've heard a lot of people say that there's too many SDAs being built. So when we talk about the shortfall in the data, but that doesn't account all the houses being built. And what that will do by default is there won't be enough people with SDA funding, so people with SIL funding will use the SDA homes and be more fit for purpose. Do you see a trend of that? People building SDAs maybe in the wrong location or the wrong level of the current levels of SDA? So do you see that happening? And I guess how can you future-proof that?
A lot of people reach out to me to head lease similar arrangements where they're even building to an SDA specification, or they haven't quite met the mark and haven't been able to get it registered, or don't want to build to the SDA requirements. So they're building similar dwellings and head leasing it to, you know, SIL operators or participants or what have you. The sector is evolving, and like in the same way as, you know, all the other registrations, not just SDA. There's always going to be a need for SDA. I think that we need to see the high quality SDA being brought to market in a multitude of design categories. SDA providers need to be transparent and open about the fact that you might not get the top dollar and that you might have to be open to accepting funding of a lesser category or just stacking your numbers on that. There's space for SDA housing and to continue building it in a multitude of design categories. My hope is that the NDIS look at the pricing arrangement currently to make a few design categories more attractive, so that we can see some other categories such as robust villas, for example, so that we can still continue to house people that get that level of SDA.
If you had a builder who was building SDA premises and also considering building SIL homes, would there be a difference in how you would advise them to build? Obviously, they don't need to meet the SDA categories, but is it wise for them to still build to a certain level, like robust or HPS, with the ability to have things like hoist as a SIL property?
Absolutely, definitely. If you look at a few things like, circulation space, doorway width, accessibility in terms of bathrooms, if you've got some robust features as well in there, then those should be built in all houses looking to service people with disabilities, just because it allows multiple individuals with different support needs to live there. I love the idea, if you're going to do just SIL only, or even in SDA, that they all have an individual breakout space so that they can still have some level of independence. So what we are seeing now is, bedrooms with an ensuite, but also with a small sitting area space, so that if they do, get a shared outcome in SDA or live in a SIL group home, that they've still got their own privacy, in that setting.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I think I could ask you a million more questions, but I think we've covered today's topic really well. I think I need to schedule another time to talk to you all about SIL specifically, because I think I've got like 1 billion questions I could ask you.
I'm all yours anytime, that.
Thanks so much for joining me today to talk all about a SIL provider's role inside SDA.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of SDA Mastery by Tania Gomez Consulting. We hope you found this episode helpful and valuable. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, leave us a rating and share it with others. Until next time, keep learning.